Okay. So we are up and running. And thanks everyone who showed up. If you are in the chat box, please say hello and let me know where you're from. Get your questions ready and get ready for some discussion on the book, Mindful Birthing. We've got our book out here, and I have been reading it like a mad woman. I have had 3 births in 10 days, 2 of which were in the 30+ hours. So I'm a little bit behind in my reading, though I did read the vast majority of the book. And I made lots of notes. If you guys are like me, I like to write in the book. And my 7-year-old saw me doing that and was shocked and said, "What are you doing with your book?" So I made lots of notes for us to discuss, and I'd love to hear what you guys think of the book as well. A couple of business items before we get started. You'll notice if you're watching it in the chat box that there is a little tweet button right on the left of the screen, and that'll send out or let you send out a tweet about the Doula Business Chat. So if you're on Twitter, please take a second to do that. It's, I think, super fun and helps get the word out about the event. There's also a little Facebook like. Love for you guys to like your Doula Bags page on Facebook. So then the hashtag, you know what, let me make sure that I have that up, is DoulaBizChat. I'm going to turn that on. You guys can see it. There we go. And any social media you want to do is awesome. I always like to see the Instagram pictures of people watching the chat, which is super fun, and I'll try to remember to take one too. And then just another note, and I'll mention it one more time before we leave, just so that I don't forget. In the yellow box under the screen, if you're watching on the chat page, is a link to join tomorrow night's question and answer webinar about the 100% Doula program that I've started. And I do see a question in the chat box from Lena, whether tonight's the last day to register, and actually tomorrow night is the last day to register for the membership before it closes. And I'd love for you to join me tomorrow night. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern for a Q&A about the program. If you have any questions or you're thinking about it, that's the time to get your questions answered. So we have got Sylvia in Kennesaw, so close to me. We've got Lena. We have Kelly in North Carolina, Asheville. We have, let's see, Lena's in California in the chat box. We have Carrie. Let's see where Carrie is from. We've got Kelly. Hey to everybody. If you are watching in the chat box and you haven't said hello, please do. Okay, so let's jump in to Mindful Birthing and our discussion about the book. Now, I set this up as the first Doula Book Club selection because it has been a popular book that I have seen my doula clients read or mention. And I actually was introduced to the concept of mindful practice for childbirth. Actually, gosh, it's been about 2 years ago when I was, for a very brief time, an instructor for a company called ISIS Parenting, an unfortunate name, and the company has since gone out of business. If anyone out there is familiar with the company, I'd love for you to shoot me an email and just hear about your experiences. But anyway, when I was teaching childbirth for that company, they had put together a curriculum called Mind Body Birth, and it was teaching the concept of mindfulness. And I did not have a lot of training before I started teaching it, probably not enough. And I only taught the series one time to 2 couples. But I was very intrigued by the concept. And as a fellow former, I don't know if former's the right, go through 2 hypnobirthing series of classes, one for my own pregnancy, and one for some recertification, and with a couple that I was being their doula. So it kind of has that feel of hypnobirthing to me, and I just was very interested in it. So that's what drew me to the book. It is written by Nancy Bardacke, I think is how you pronounce her last name, and she's a certified nurse midwife, and she practices at UCSF and teaches mindful-based childbirth and parenting program there, and she is the author of the book. So it's a very extensive book. It is 300 plus pages, and it includes a lot of practical practice for moms and their partners to prepare for using mindfulness practice in their childbirth. So I really just thought I would tackle this maybe by going through some of the highlights that I found in the book, and then I'd love to hear from anybody in the chat room if there was any part, if you read the book, first of all, if you are familiar with it, if you're familiar with it, if you read it, if it's something that is intriguing to you, and I'd also like you to just chime in on any of the points maybe that I bring up, or any of your points maybe that you thought of. So the first thing I wanted to, or that really caught me, and this had to do with my situation personally when I taught that mindful mind-body birth class. She said that, excuse me, when she has people sign up for the class, that she calls them and explains in detail the concept of the class and the style, and make sure that they are fully on board with this method of childbirth. And I thought that was excellent. Now, I imagine that sometimes she has students that maybe decide not to take the class after they hear more information about the way the class is going. But I think that's really important, because I personally would not want a couple to get into an extensive series of a childbirth class where they don't really realize what it's about, and maybe it's not something that appeals to them. And that's what happened. I was teaching them really about the class. They just thought it was a regular childbirth class. And they were kind of shocked when I started talking about mindfulness. And actually, I was really in depth into this discussion about mindfulness and how it works and that kind of thing. And one of the dad of the couple that didn't understand the class, raised his hand and he said, "So when are we going to talk about the epidural?" And this was day one of a 5-week series mindfulness class. And I knew that this couple probably wasn't in the class that was going to best suit the childbirth that they were interested in. And I felt really bad for them that they were kind of pushed into this series when it really didn't work for them. So I liked that in the book, Nancy says that for her students, that she makes sure she knows what they're in for, what they've signed up for. And just a quick check, if you're in the chat, just please say hello and let me know that you're hearing me, and there aren't any technical difficulties, would be great. Okay, so real quickly, just to read, mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So Nancy says that mindfulness is not a religious practice, though it's rooted in Buddhist tradition. Okay, so it's very interesting. I like that she kind of gives that background. Now, the book kind of follows her class, and gives lots of information about or examples from her students. So she'll say, a particular a person's name, she'll say Grace, she'll say Carrie, she'll say, you know, and give little tiny stories about each, which I think is pretty interesting. And I assume that all of them are true experiences from what she's taught. And I find that really interesting. Okay, so the next part that I think I thought was something notable is she talks about labor in 2 phases. The first phase is the allowing phase. She says, so that's when the cervix is opening to full dilation. And the second stage is the bringing forth phase. So that's the urge to push and bearing down. So I just really like that terminology. You know, so many times I think I know I'm a Lamaze teacher, and I just when I'm teaching childbirth, I use a lot of the technical phases, like the first stage of labor, second stage of labor. And while those are accurate, I think they don't really, maybe some people don't connect with them. And I feel like those 2 concepts of labor having 2 phases is an interesting way to connect to labor. Because you can kind of picture the allowing, you know, that cervix, allowing the cervix to open, and then the bringing forth, you know, the really, you can kind of visually imagine your uterus is bringing forth the baby. So I liked those terms. I thought that was pretty cool. I'd love to hear if anybody else has a thought on those terms, or just using different terminology and how it affects our doula clients and our childbirth clients. Or if you've had any experiences where certain clients maybe don't want to use a certain word. I know sometimes with hypnobabies and hypnobirthing, using the word contraction isn't always what they are teaching. Sometimes they'll use surges. But I think, you know, using the right term can really have an impact on how people are feeling. So I'll give just a second to see if anyone has any comments, and then we can talk about the next part, and that would be how she talks about the breath. So we know using breath is, I like to talk about it as the core of childbirth prep and labor, dealing with labor. You know, it's sort of like the foundation, using our breath. And one line that I highlighted that I think was particularly good, she says, by anchoring us in the present, the breath provides a way to step out of the thinking mind and into the place of calm, ease, and connection with ourselves, others, and the world around us. So that was page 45 for anybody who's taking notes, when she's talking about the breath. And actually the title of that chapter is The Breath, a Friend for Life. I really like that, because I do feel that so many of our childbirth preparation techniques that we use really can transfer over to dealing with challenges and mental challenges in our real life. I would say that so many of the techniques you can just go to for when you're experiencing pain or experiencing challenge. Does anybody else out there feel that way too? Okay, so let me flip on over to page, let's see, 68, 69. She is talking about the timing of childbirth. And I especially like this because, oh my gosh, how many times are we up against that estimated due date and how accurate it is, and maybe, you know, not arguing, but negotiating with the care providers about Is that date accurate? Is maybe a client has ovulated early or late, or has a long cycle, or is sure she knows when she conceived, and maybe the due date seems a little off, and maybe maybe clients are up against inductions for going past due, or has a baby that seems to be measuring big. So many of that is so time is such kind of a sticky subject. So she has two concepts of time. One she calls horticultural time, and says that's a conditional time. And then the other one is called industrial time, and it's based on the clock. So she gives these two and says that childbirth is really should be considered part of horticultural time. Or she's talking horticultural being like the farming time and when to harvest. And harvest is not necessarily, harvesting something growing in a field is not necessarily set on a set number of days. It's set on other factors, like how much sun the plant got, how much water they got, what the soil nutrients were. I thought that was a really interesting concept that I'd never heard that before. Industrial time being very scheduled and very calculated and very finite. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, I think that concept might be tough to translate over to let a care provider know. Hey, I'd like to really put my estimated due date. Horticultural time, can you use that calendar? Or just see how that goes. But I love it as a concept, though I'm not really sure how that translates practically into the lives of our clients. So I'm going to take a quick break because the chat box is it's a couple minutes delayed from the recording. And I see that, let's see, Kelly has a comment. She says that she also liked page 49, in quotes, by paying attention to the breath, you can interrupt that habit of trying to use your thinking mind to do something that is, in fact, impossible to do. Control the future. Begin to come to terms with uncertainty and not knowing. I love that. That's so interesting because, it is so much in labor trying to get out of that thinking mind, right? And really thinking that so much about the mindfulness is the present and not the future. And really so much about labor really is just thinking about the present. I know that when I teach class, I usually say, and talk to my doula clients, I usually say that I give, if anyone asks me questions about like how long, how much longer, or anything about time and how long it'll take, I never give an answer. I always give something vague, like it's going to take as long as it'll take. And I said sometimes that really frustrates people. But the truth of the matter is that I really have no idea. I mean, how many times have we seen will be done quickly turn into really slow, or something that we think might be long end up being fast? We really don't know how time is going to go in labor. Kelly also commented on the horticultural time and industrial time concept, saying babies are born on their birthdays, not their due date. I love that. The baby, babies know birthdays. They do not have a little calendar in there with the chart, the little dial, right? Figuring out when they're due. They come when they're ready. Love that. Okay, so let's see. Let me look at my next notes. This is more about, I highlighted another couple of concepts and terminology that I think were interesting. And this is in regards to pain. So, and I know in other childbirth methods, classifying pain and talking about pain is something that's really interesting. And can be hard to use. Sometimes I shy away from using the word pain, and I talk more about intensity or sensation. But what her concept that she's using is called, she calls it this is on page 76, and she calls it transformational pain. And that transformational pain is normal pain. And what she means by this transformational pain is that the body, it's a type of pain that comes from when the body is transforming. And some other pains, like swollen feet or aching back, is also pain from a transforming body. Another one that she gave, that I thought was funny, interesting, was that teething. Teething is an example of transformational pain. So that totally makes sense. That it's a changing of our body that's causing that. So it's not an illness and it's not an injury, but it is a transformation that's causing that pain. So I thought that was really cool, and definitely something that made me just think that interesting way. As an instructor, I usually talk about that. It's not an illness, and it's not an injury, but I like that it is physical happening. Okay, and anybody in the chat box, just fill time, and I'll take a pause whenever I see it come through. The next thing that I really thought was interesting about pain is about the reaction to pain. And she says there's 3 components to reacting to pain. There's the physical component. This is how it actually feels. There's the affective component, so the emotions that we feel. And the cognitive component. So what are our thoughts about the pain? And I thought those were interesting. She talks about, stubbing her toe and realizing that there's pain that she's feeling, but then, how her mind perceives that, and training her mind to realize that, instead of thinking to the future, is her toe broken? She really is just trying to be mindful of the moment and not, go 10 steps down the line, like her toe's broken and she's not going to be able to do this and that kind of thing. She says mindfulness practice gives us options for relating to the physical sensations we call pain. So, it's all react to that sensation, right? And I bet a lot of us do this when we talk to our doula clients and our childbirth clients about the pain. And I don't know if you, let me know in the chat box if you do this too. But I usually it's backwards day, so if we have a strong contraction, that's maybe a good thing. So on a normal day, a really strong pressure sensation would be probably that's positive, and we try to be thankful for those feelings because they're our baby. And so just trying to kind of flip it around, flip those sensations, things that normally are normally seem like they're negative, sometimes be positive. So if a client says, "Oh, that was a really strong one," then that's really good. That good that we have a strong one. So that's a positive thing. I think retraining your mind. Let me know in the chat box if you do that same kind of thing. So I usually do say, it's backwards day, and I think that definitely, appeals to people in a way. She also says that mindfulness helps us find an accepting, non-reactive relationship to the intense physical sensations we are having in the present moment. So it's an acceptance, instead of usually what we would do would be to try to find a way to fix the pain or get over it or suppress it with an injury or an illness, but with childbirth and with mindfulness to accept it. So I really like that. Awesome. Okay, so I am going to flip my pages a little bit, talking about mindfulness. I know that I have a couple messages notes in the chat box. So if you're watching and you haven't said hello, please say hi. Let me just check my notes. I'm just going through just some of the things that I thought were really interesting from the book. And I'd love to hear from anyone who has read it and what your thoughts were. She does go through the ice example, where she has her students hold ice. And I do that as well. And the one thing that she did that I don't do, so I'd love to add would be having the students complain while they're holding the ice, and really just, make it, just talk about how bad it feels, and that really intensifies sort of how negative it is. I know that I always love to see everybody's reactions to the ice example. Sometimes people are really uncomfortable with it, and others, I feel people aren't even fazed by it. So it's so interesting, the difference between people. Okay, so let's see. I also have notes from page 129. And here she talks about using, she calls it sounding. I've always used the word vocalization to talk about that technique of doing the oohs and the ahs and our exhales. And just, I highlighted the phrase, elongating the out breath may help you let go even more fully into the parasympathetic calm and connection system. So the reason I highlighted this is because often when I'm teaching class, I will use words like vocalization really feels good. And it's such a vague description. It doesn't really give my students much sort of hard facts and hard sort of, it's just kind of vague. It feels good. Yes, that's true. I have had many students that use that vocalization, that use it for coping, and it's very successful. But I just liked the way, the sort of scientific statement that she made about this vocalization. So elongating the out breath may help you let go even more fully into the parasympathetic calm and connection system. So I just really like the way that put it onto what I know that I already teach. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause, and I have the last couple things that I wanted to talk about. But I do want to pause for the chat box to catch up. Anyone have anything to add? Any comments on what I've gone over? Whether it be the ice or the vocalization, the terminology. If anyone has any experience with mindfulness, I'd love to hear that as well. And I will take a 2-second pause and let the chat room catch up, and then we'll talk about a couple more bits that I thought were really interesting about this book. And while it is a very long book, I will say there's a very significant appendix, and there's also a section for moms to have kind of a journal in the back, which I think is interesting. you know, it makes it a little bit like a workbook when she does that. Okay. So if you're just joining us, please jump in to the chat box and don't hesitate. Now, this last section is a little bit about helping a mom get into that labor land when she turns inward. And Kelly in the chat says she's enjoyed this book as a doula, but also because she's pregnant. I can see that. Yeah, I could see that. You know, it's not a traditional doula book where we're, you know, learning about, but it is, you know, it's really meant for pregnant couples. And yeah, Kelly says she's reading with her doula hat on now and going to reread with her husband and participate in the activities with them. Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to hear how that goes too, since I have never gone through this method pregnant, and I really haven't heard of a lot of people going through it. Now, just a quick note, she does have trainings for to teach this class. I actually looked on her website, mindfulbirthing.com, to see when she was having them, and the next one is coming up in March, and it's in France, which I would absolutely love to attend that, but that doesn't is not in my future. Let's see, this March, but maybe another time. That would be really cool. Okay, so this last part I thought that was interesting, just that I noted, was had to do with kind of helping moms get into that labor land state, you know, about turning inward. And she talks about avoid stimulating the thinking mind or the prefrontal cortex of a laboring woman, because it may stimulate mental chatter or induce worrying thoughts, which are counterproductive to the normal physiology of the labor process. So I love this because I think as doulas we do this anyway, but again, it's just putting words to this practice. You know, when we are working with our clients, we usually try not to ask a lot of questions. I know I teach a dad's class, a dad section of a childbirth class, and I try to make a really big emphasis on, as a support person, not to ask mom questions. Instead, try to lead her and give her and offer her ideas without asking a question. So instead of asking, do you want a sip of water? Just hand water. Instead of asking, do you want a cloth on your forehead? Just put a cloth on her forehead. She could always take it off and not sip the water. But instead of getting in that, not having to put mom in that decision-making process is going to help her stay in that labor land. So Nancy, in her book, Mindful Birthing, she does put a lot of emphasis on that, you know, having a quiet, peaceful environment, not a lot of chit chat, not a lot of engaging in conversation, trying to help mom go inward. You know, and that's when labor is really nice and active. And I think as doulas, we've all seen that to be really true and how that makes a big difference. And I'm sure that you guys have probably seen this as well, that when maybe a family member or care provider comes in and starts asking questions and can kind of throw mom off and throw some of her coping abilities off, and having to try to bring her back into the moment can be a little bit difficult. And you know, that moment is really that concept of mindfulness, the right now, not looking at the past, not looking at the future. It's that idea about one contraction at a time. So much of that really resonates with me. And then this last I wanted to talk about was really just the title of the chapter. And it's chapter 10, so page 162. And the chapter says, when you're walking, just walk. when you're birthing, just birth. So I love that title. I think it says so much about this process of birth. I mean, you know, and I think that is also really hard for a lot of moms, that we're so much in the what's going to happen next that it's hard to just be in the moment. It's hard to just breathe through the contraction, enjoy the break, breathe through the contraction, enjoy the break, without thinking about where in the progress, how many centimeters dilated am I, when is the doctor, midwife going to come in next. And I'm thinking about this concept a lot myself. And sometimes when I teach childbirth education, I almost feel like I don't want to even discuss kind of the biology of labor, because I really don't want moms to overthink it. I don't want them to be thinking, okay, I'm in active labor now, and this is happening and that's happening. And Lena in the chat room says, just do it. I love that. Right. It's like just be and just do and not think it. So I really love the title of that. And I think that that's something that all of us can learn from. I know I can learn from in birth and in life in general, right? Just be in the moment and have your attention on what you're doing now and not 3 steps ahead. And I know I am often 3 steps ahead, thinking of the next thing. So love that. And then one last little thing that I highlighted. And again, there's lots of little gems in this book. So I just picked out really some of my favorites. And this is in the section where she talks about really, it's kind of like a practical section. The chapter is called Causes and Conditions, and then the subtitle is Navigating What Is. So when to me, that's sort of how she brings it real, how she brings that mindful birthing practice into the real. And one little gem I thought was, I'm just checking my technical, see if I have any technical difficulties, because I see that we might have had a problem, but I'm just going to keep on going. Hopefully we didn't. But this last little gem was in the hospital. She says, as soon as you get into your labor room, place a big sign over the clock that says now. And I thought that was really cool. Let me just check. Okay, I'm going to peek over to, our Google Hangout always seems to have some kind of little error. So I'm just peeking in. Let's see if you guys get back online. Please let me know. I don't have anybody else on air today. Uh-oh, it might still be out. Well, I know that it's still recording, so I will just finish up. Hopefully the chat box will catch up with me. Let me pause. I'm going to just write a quick little note to the chat box. Modern technology. With hearing anybody's thoughts. And any ideas or anything that you learned, or if you hadn't read the book yet, thoughts or ideas. Okay, let me just send a quick message. Thanks for hanging in there. Okay. So let's do it. And just, I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts. Just shout it out on any book or have the book, or maybe not. Maybe it sounds like a lot of the same, and whether it's something you might recommend to clients. You know, I'm thinking that I would recommend it to clients that are particularly interested in mindfulness, meditation. Maybe they have thought about taking hypnobirthing, but they're not sure. I know they're different, but you know, maybe they want to explore both types, both kind of childbirth methods. I think that it's something I definitely will have available that I can lend out to doula clients, and they can just take a look and see whether it's something that they might be interested in. Let me just do a quick check. And we will wrap up in just a few minutes. I'm trying to use mindfulness on this technical issue. It seems like maybe the video has is not working with our chat box. Okay, so I haven't heard whether they're still in there or not, but thanks to all of you for listening to our book club chat and sending your input through the chat box. I do appreciate it. If you have other thoughts on mindful birthing, I would love to hear them. Or if you're watching this video after the live chat, as always, I usually put the notes from our doula chat in my blog. Let's see. Kelly says, diagram on page 82 is great. Let me look at that. I think it might be the one I'm thinking of. Oh yeah, that is a really cool one. So it's the uterus during labor, contraction, expansion. It says, a good illustration of what's happening in the uterus. A little pic of it. But it's pretty cool. I love to see awesome diagrams and figures that really help get those points home. And okay, so any thoughts, just shout them out. I'll put all of my notes together in a blog with a link to the replay, and I'll try to do some editing so that we get some of the technical difficulties out of our replay. But I sure appreciate everyone being here. I don't have the next book picked out yet, so I would love any suggestions for our next book. Now, I had a lot of good comments from this book, but I know that the time of the webinar, of the Doula Business Chat was maybe a little hard for some people. It's late on the East Coast, and West Coast, it's kind of right at dinner. So I'd also love to hear any kind of feedback about the timing, and if you're interested in doing it at a different time. And then just to wrap up our quick business items, I am going to take a picture for Instagram, because I love Instagram. And then don't forget to, if you want to do a little tweet, there's a tweet button, and use hashtag DoulaBizChat. And then also in that yellow box under the video is a link to sign up for tomorrow night's question and answer webinar, free webinar about the new offering. That's a doula membership site called 100% Doula. And we're just going to do an hour tops, maybe even less, depending upon questions. But I do have several doulas that have some lingering questions. The last day to sign up for the membership site is tomorrow night. And so we're doing a webinar right at the day before the night, a few hours before it closes, just if anyone has any sort of last minute thoughts before they make a decision. Carrie says the birth partner. Yes, birth partner is a great one, and I'd love to. It's been a while since I've read it, so I'd love to refresh a read with that. That's a great suggestion, and definitely one that is something that's very applicable to all doulas. So it's a good doula book club book. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining and listening and hanging in there with any of the technical difficulties. I sure appreciate it. I love doing these doula business chats and talking about different topics. So our next chat will probably be in 2 weeks. I don't have it on the calendar yet, but I will. There is a tab, a section on the Your Doula Bag site that lets you know when I have a link to all the past chats, and I also have, I will have skills. So make sure to check there and see what's new. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the chat box. And next time, if anyone is up for being on video, I would love to have that too. So thank you so much for your valuable time, and have a great night. Thanks, you guys. Doulas rock.